vielen Dank, dass ihr die Workshop teilnimmt. Ziel von das Workshop und die zwei Workshops, die wir organisieren, sind ein bisschen neue Einblicke, Eindrücke in verschiedene Konzepte reinzugeben für Coaches und für Vereine. Das erste Workshop ist, wie ihr weißt, über Long-Term Athletic Development. Und ich hoffe, dass ihr ein paar neue Sachen lernt. Und bei Fragen, bitte alle Fragen in den Chat einfach reinschreiben. Am Ende werden wir eine Fragesession machen. Und nachher werde ich auch ein Post-Survey-Link in den Chat reintun, dass ich euch beten werden, auch auszufüllen. Ist auch wichtig für uns, ein bisschen Info zu bekommen, wie wir in der Zukunft vielleicht die Sachen besser veranstalten können. So first workshop is on long-term athlete development, introduction into it. And I'm really happy that we have Coach Mike MacKay from Basketball Canada, or Canada Basketball, with us. Just a quick introduction to him. I would not do justice to introduce him myself to all the stuff he's done. He's, I think, currently the technical director in Canada Basketball. He's got lots of titles. He's had lots of titles in Canada Basketball. He's one of the people who created the long-term athlete development model for basketball. So I'm really happy that he took the time today to talk to all of us and give us his knowledge, share his knowledge with all of us. So Mike, thank you very much. Welcome, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Chris, and welcome to everybody. I'm just hope to share some ideas, share some of the lessons we've learned. This started back in around 2004. There were 50 of us at that time, managers of coach education, and we were all in a room in a hotel in Hull, Quebec, and we came up with this. We needed to do long-term athlete development model before we did our coach education models, because it didn't work. The government was telling us, build your coach education models, and we said, no, we need the long-term athlete development model first. And then from that, it evolved into where it is today. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Just give me a second. Just give me a thumbs up. It's good.
Looks good.
Okay. So I put just in my title there, February 1st, I'm going to be going back to my roots as the director for technical development. There's Canada Basketball. I started off, as you'll see, coach education from 2004 to 2010. And my main job was to develop the long-term athlete development and then develop what we called competency-based coaching education. So at each stage of the model that we could develop competent coaches. And then after the London Olympics, I was hired strictly for women's high performance. So from 2012 Olympics right through until these past Olympic in Paris, I've been the high performance director in developing what we call the gold medal model. And most of my job has been coaching coaches throughout our women's high performance system. So really with the technical one, I'm just going backwards a little bit, but I think it's needed because we need it. There was no vision. We were lacking some of the vision that we needed to be moving forward with long-term athlete development and coaching. So these are just two websites. So the first one's just our Canada Basketball website. And if you go to under development and long-term athlete development, it doesn't give you a lot. We're in the process right now of coming out with what we call our 3.0 version. And Chris, I think I sent you the first version, and I hope you were able to send that out. Like I said, that was developed around 2006, I think that came out. So part of my job is to make sure the new version 3.0 comes out. And it'll be much more electronic than an old paper book that we wrote. And then the Sport for Life, that's kind of the generic one that all this came from. And it's still a going thing within Canada. But there's been a lot of lessons learned over time. So the three main goals for long-term athlete development, or LTAD to shorten it, is one is for physical literacy. We want to promote and develop physical literacy for everybody so that everybody learns how to move. Let's put it that way. The second one is there is the striving for excellence, which we think of that as sometimes our podium pathway, but there is for high performance sport, is making sure that we have a base that can move to high performance, but it's also being active for life, that people have the opportunity to stay active throughout their entire life. So those are the three main goals, and each one is just as important. Not one is more important than the other. And I think where it gets problems come in is when one tries to make that the excellence one's the most important. But if you don't have the other two, that one can have some problems. The second one is make sure quality is important. So quality means, are there good programs in good places delivered by good people? And one of the issues we're running into over COVID, being an indoor sport in a winter country like Canada, a lot of facilities were shut down. And what happened in places like Toronto, where I'm from right now, is there are a lot of these private organizations start to just take old warehouses and make private gyms. And there's a lot of these people making money off this now, but they are not good programs. They are not good places. And I'm afraid they're not being delivered by good people. And it's very, very important that we kind of get control of this, because we're ultimately responsible for the delivery of the sport. But just the way how COVID and Canada being close to the US, there's a lot of private organizations who just want to start things on their own and not be associated with things. So that's part of what we have to do is help parents especially understand what are these quality programs. And it's not just what's on the website. And then we need to make sure the programs are optimal. So we're giving the participant what she needs. I'll use this little young lady here, when they need it, and the way that makes the most progress. So I put this picture in here deliberately because this is not an appropriate ball for this young lady. It's too heavy and it's too big. So we have to make sure that each stage of the athlete development model, that it's an appropriate program for those players. Inclusion. In Canada, this is very important. Inclusion is non-negotiable. So everybody must feel welcome and safe and included. And we need to make sure that there's proper servicing for those programs to allow that. One of the issues that we found was a lot of times it was the cost was restricting some of our best players from playing in some of our elite teams because they couldn't afford transportation to the tryouts. They knew they couldn't afford to pay. So we had to find ways to make sure some of our better athletes from communities at risk were able to play. And it had a huge impact. And I put this picture in here deliberately too, because this is what elite basketball looks like in Canada now. If I had taken this picture when I started in 2004, that's not what the picture would have looked like. There's two young ladies in here who are Indigenous. One's 6'5" and one's 6'4". There's numerous African Canadians, but one of them is actually African immigrant. Three are probably from more Caribbean African Canadians, and one is from the States. And then same thing on the Caucasians, one is French Canadian, two are from Eastern Europe. So it's a really diverse. And then the trainer right beside in the front there, she's from the Philippines. So that's Canada right now. And so it's very important that we find ways to make sure that all these people feel welcome and can play. We would not be at where we are on the world stage without having this diversity part. And then collaboration, working together. So the community, sport organizations, health, education sector, all work when it's aligned. And this is another big task I'm having. We kind of, over COVID, have lost some of this alignment. And when it's aligned, it makes it easier for people to see the pathways. Now, I put this hockey picture up here because this is a story I like to tell. It's semi-true. I embellish it as a Canadian I'll embellish it a little bit, but the point is very clear. So there was a U7 hockey championship being played in a town, and the two teams were getting ready to go to the championship game, and they had the final league meeting before the game. And the coach of one team, he had won the championship like 10 out of the last not 10 years. He was a legend in the community. His teams always won, but he was really upset at the meeting. And his problem was, he said, "Well, this new coach of this team we're playing, she plays everybody different positions. Like one day it's somebody in nets, another day it's another one, somebody's on defense. I don't get it. They don't play the same position. How are we supposed to prepare for this game when no one plays in the same positions all the time?" And she said, "Well, in this game, it's going to be Billy's going to be in nets, and so is in this position, so and so is in that position. That's how our rotation goes. We believe in long-term athlete development." So he was quite happy when he heard that, and he knew the guy at the rink, and he snuck in an extra practice before the game. Well, the game was really exciting. It ended up that his team won the game 1-0. Okay, but his goalie stopped 50 shots. It was a shutout. 50 shots, and his team only got 20 shots, so they were outshot, but this goalie was outstanding. But after the game, the parents of the goalie were furious. They weren't sure that they were ever going to have their son play hockey again. And the reason was because once the coach knew who was going to be in nets for the other team, he realized that that was the only kid who could lift the puck. So what he did was he had the goalie lie down sideways completely across the net the whole game. And since none of the other players could lift the puck, they couldn't score a goal. He thought it was brilliant because he outcoached the other team and he won the medal. But it totally embarrassed the child. No one was happy. Everybody left mad. And that's, again, he was in the wrong context. He shouldn't have been coaching at that level. That was the wrong idea. And so he wasn't aligned with the context. And I always say to people all the time, what are you doing when you make this player always play just in the post at 7 years old? You're making them lie down in front of the net. So we have to understand there's things we do sometimes that really aren't in the best interest of the development of the player and in the development of the sport. So this is the actual model. When they first built the model, it was actually more this pyramid shaped. But what we quickly realized was we didn't want a pyramid. We wanted a square so that when you're born, you enter in, and when you exit, you can exit out. When you have a pyramid, it means you're losing people along the way. So it's very important that everybody's included in the model. We also added this along the way. There's awareness and first involvement. It never used to be there. It was we always assume everybody come in at the bottom. Well, no, people can come in along the side. I think it's very important in your organizations that you know, how are people becoming aware of your sport and how do they first get involved? And this was big for us with the immigrant communities in Canada, was how do we make sure that those immigrants are being engaged? And this is where hockey's had a hard time. Hockey's still big in Canada, but its numbers are falling down because they did not address awareness and first involvement for the new Canadians. And so they were relying on a slowly reducing population. And so we've had to make sure that we're doing that. Now, I've added this one here, learn to win. In Canada and the US, school still dominates a lot of basketball. So train to compete, think of that more high school. Learn to win is more university. Train to win would be pro and national teams. We just felt that there was a big difference between a a high school and a university athlete. So we added in our own Learn to Win section. So probably the most important thing for long-term athlete development is this whole idea of the context. And I always like to say it's who plus why equals what plus how. And being an old math teacher, we always start on the left side of the equation. It's who are you coaching and why are they playing? Before you start to get caught up in the what and the how. Too often I'll get into conversations with people and they want to know, how do we do this and what can we coach here and what are we going to use for our press? And I go, whoa, 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 slow down. Who are you coaching and why are they there? If they're there for fun and recreation, don't get too worried about making it so competitive if they don't want to be there. But if you're coaching the senior national team, that's different. You need to know why they're there. So it's very, very important that we always keep reminding ourselves, what's the context that we're dealing with? So this is just the first three. It's just building a solid foundation. I'm not expecting you to read all these things, but it's active start. That's before, say, 5, and then fundamentals, making it fun, and then learning to train, right? They're learning a wide range of sports skills. This is where there's a concern I have. It says that children pass through these stages and they're developing. Adults learning a new sport pass through this fundamental and learn to train stage. This is the kind of statements you got to be careful with, because people sometimes now take this with younger athletes, say, oh, she's 15 years old, but she's a fundamental athlete. Let's just put her back with all the other fundamental aged athletes who were just starting. You take a 15-year-old girl and put her back with 7- and 8-year-old girls, she will not show up to the next practice. Because from the social emotional pillar, that doesn't work. I would even argue you took an adult and say, oh, you're new to the sport, we're going to put you in with 13, 12, and 13-year-old. That's not, and I don't think they've explained this well enough. I think you have to be aware of all the pillars. And just assuming that you can put other people in with weaker athletes, or same thing we run into with moving a player up. We had an athlete who was 15 years old and they want her on the senior national team. I said, she's not ready. There's a big difference what senior women talk about and what 15-year-olds talk about. What are we going to do for social emotional support? But they were just thinking, oh, her basketball skills are ready for that. So you have to consider other things besides just the basketball skills when you're making decisions. So this is really quick, just some of the fundamentals. So we really focus at this age, 5 to 7, on fundamentals and a little bit of principles of play. And the principles of play are spacing, movement, and the timing and sequencing. Well, at this age, the spacing just be like, make sure when you move, there's no one around you. Keep your arm space, right? Movement, you can run, you can jump, you can go sideways. And, timing is just when to go, when to stop. It's just really simple stuff. So they're learning fundamental movements through sport in a positive, inclusive way. So I just put it in here. So you can see there's not a whole lot of basketball there. But we would eventually get into some basketball type things where they're shooting at a small hoop, where they have to decide, should I pass it? Should I dribble it? Really simple stuff. But it's mostly fun, and they're learning movement skills, locomotion, how to move, agility, balance, coordination, and then sport manipulation, how they can move objects and balance, things like that. Fundamentals 8 to 9. So again, there's the principles of play. So now they're going to start to play some more modified games. So we would start playing more 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, mostly around this age. I think the 3-on-3 is excellent. We might get up to 4-on-4. Okay? That doesn't mean there's not groups that want to start 5-on-5 right from 5-year-olds. But we've did a lot of studying around how many times players touch a ball when they play 3-on-3 as opposed when they play 5-on-5 and 4-on-4. So the more touches, more kids being active. So, you're playing on a full court, you have 10 kids playing. But when we go cross courts 4-on-4, we can get up to about 16 kids playing. When we play 3-on-3, we can get up even more kids playing at a time. And so in an hour practice that they may have once a week, man, they're coming out tired. But when they go to a 5-on-5 game, they may only play like 15 minutes of activity. So, So again, you can see that, again, they're doing the movement skills, some sports skills, but we're looking on multiplayer and individual player. Mostly they're working on individual player and then a little bit on 2-on-2, 3-on-3, but we're not running a whole lot of plays. It's more just basically working a lot of spacing movements. This is the learn to train, probably one of the most important, where they're going to start to really focus in on the sport concepts a little more. And you can see now we've added in strategy. So before it was fundamentals, principles of play. Now we have strategy. So what are we going to do basically with our principles of play? What are we going to do with our spacing, our movement, and our timing and sequencing in offense, offensive transition, and then defense, defensive training, and just the basic things. So like for us, one can't guard two. That's basic principle. No defense. Be between your check and the basket, right? Just real simple concepts that they're starting to play with. And then you can start to see what we're starting to do with just how we break it down, giving people a cookbook. We find we have to start off giving our coaches cookbooks, and then the progression is to teach them how to become chefs. But most coaches starting off this age need the cookbook. And then the 12 to 15-year-old train to train. Okay, so now we're going to get into more what we call a global player, which is we want them to be able to play, use all their skills and decision-making, being a playmaker at different positions. We don't like them, like I said, making them play nets only. Learn to play at all different positions. Okay? And again, you can see same sort of thing. So we introduce problems. I don't like to talk just about the skills. I don't believe that we just have a whole bunch of skills and now you get to play with them. We like to present now. Here's the problems the games presents. What are the solutions you can have? So we really believe in a constraint-led approach or, ecological coaching, whatever those new terms are, but games approach. But we just find that players learn so much better. And we're trying to develop playmakers, not just robots. And then style of play again. And then we start with some simple tactics. And mostly this is scouting, knowing the main strength and weaknesses. She likes to go left. She's a shooter. They like to run a little screen here. Not going spending a whole lot of time, but just that they're starting to understand how you have to be a little more tactical. And what I'm trying to say now to coaches is you have to have players start to understand a plan. They just can't be reactive all the time. They have to understand how to be proactive and start to execute a plan, because that's what it's going to take as they move on. Now, I apologize for the nudity, but this, I think, really shows the toughest age group is that train to train, and that's because of puberty. And I used to jokingly say, if we could just get rid of puberty, it would make it so much easier. But you can see, like on the girl side, look at the 12-year-olds, the differences, and then look at the males, 14-year-olds. Like it's two different worlds. But it's also look at 12-year-old girl. You could have a 12-year-old girl playing against 14-year-old boy, and she would dominate. Like if you take that 14-year-old boy and put him as a 12-year-old boy, girls can dominate in these early age. So you have a girl who's matured at say 12, she can dominate boys because she's bigger, faster, stronger. Where our problem runs into is, this is an example again where you would say, oh, let's take the 14-year-old boys and put them down with other people that are the same, or take the older girls and move them up. But again, you got to remember the social, emotional piece. That's their peers who they've grown up with. We call this the yellow and green banana continuum. There's an awful tendency to choose all the yellow bananas at this time, the early matures, because they're bigger, faster, stronger. I was a dominant athlete in junior high because I was bigger, faster, stronger. My fault problem was I was 5'7" and never grew again. Whereas all the other players who were late matures, green bananas, continued to grow. And so we have to be very careful in helping organizations understand how we keep them involved. And especially for us in women's basketball, 13 years old, 12, 13 is when the big drop off happens. And a lot of times you lose all these late matures. And oops, I got those backwards. That's my banana should be opposite. I apologize for that. I just realized this yellow is the early matures and green is the late. That's my mistake. I just saw that. But I think you get the idea. You really have to be very strategic during this time. If not, you can really lose players. And the problem, especially with girls, when you lose them to basketball, you lose them to sport. And we know from a lot of studies how important and how impactful sport can be for young women, especially. I would also argue for men too, if done right. So this is just silly, but if you look at these top players, like Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team. Scottie Pippen was an Arkansas State. Anybody know where Arkansas State is? You never hear about them. Kevin McHale didn't make his high school team. Bob Cousy didn't make his high school team. David Robinson was in the Naval Academy. Bill Russell got cut from his high school team. Hakeem Olajuwon was playing soccer. Well, the reason was they were all green bananas. They were all late matures. And like David Robinson grew with something like 6, 7 inches when he was in the Naval Academy. You know, no one knew he was going to be a great player. Scottie Pippen grew about 4 inches when he was in university. Okay, so it's in a lot of sports, some of the best athletes are the ones who grew up late because they're still growing as they're maturing, and they can become even bigger and faster. The other one we find sometimes with early matures is they haven't built resiliency. Because they've just relied on being bigger, faster, stronger, when everybody catches up to them, they've not found out those resiliency skills of how to endure, how to push through, how to deal with frustration that sometimes the green bananas have had to deal with their whole life growing up through these ages. So, who are you coaching? This is what we do. And again, I don't expect you to read all this. I can share this with you, but just giving you an idea of what's in our coaching education. So this is in our coach education reference material. And it's very important that whatever age is being coached, we want the coaches to go and look and understand who are you coaching. So this is just an example. There's a lot more than this. This is just be an example. Okay, so it just says 8 to 9-year-olds. They need well-established routines and daily activities. So to me, that would mean, hey, if I can have practice at the same time all the time, that's going to help. Instead of it's one time it's here, another time it's here, another time, that's going to upset their routines. So the more you can make it routine, that's going to be better for them. Psychosocial. They need praise and positive feedback. So how are we going to make sure we do that? Still a little more individualistic and self-centered. And then learning. They're capable of understanding some concepts. Okay, so, but are they going to be able to understand that when you draw on the coaching board that that's them and that's a defender? Might be a struggle. Okay, so physically, okay, the growth rate is slow. Okay, so there's greater degree of motor control. So it's not like going through puberty when they're growing fast. They're always look awkward and uncoordinated. Preferences, okay, they like to do things involving their whole body. Learning. Oops, already had that one. So that's what we do. And then it's, okay, now what does that mean? So this is in there, what should they avoid? Okay, don't have them stand in the back of a line for like a long time because they're not going to be able to pay attention. They're going to get distracted. Avoid things where there's too many collisions, where they could be a risk of collisions. Okay. Act in a constant, predictable manner. So that's just things we do with our coaches, help them understand you need to know who the athletes are that you're coaching. And then this is what? This is just a table we developed for the coaches, and we get them to do a lot of activity where they've got to go through and think, okay, I'm going to look at some of the physical qualities they need to have. Well, you can see for females, there's some unhappy signs. Oh, now there's the happy face. You can start to do a little bit more of it. Okay. And then, okay, just on some of the concepts. Okay, so you can see, oh, happy faces for a lot of good one-on-one. Okay, decision making. Oh, right from the get-go, we wanted to, but don't jump into the team right away. So again, it's just helping them as a little bit of a cookbook. And then conceptual spacing. You can see spacing is very important here because we're not really doing a whole lot of those actions. We don't really worry about them. And then there's also some of the mental training, helping them understand, well, yes, you need to talk about confidence, and you can see all the way along, but okay. And that was just again to give you an idea of what we do with this in our coaching education to help the coaches know who the athletes are. Okay, this is just a little movie here. There's going to be 3 different groups play, and I want you just to think where they would fit within the model. Okay, that was just I apologize for the quality, but it's actually I wanted a little not too crystal clear and a little old, because I think it does get my point across here eventually. The first group, that was the one in the orange and the white. Anybody want to be brave enough just to come on and say what stage those athletes would be in? Or you can type it in the chat, or just.
Anybody feel free
No
to
right or
join
wrong
in.
answers.
I would say train to compete. That's my guess.
Okay. Okay. The second group then, what can you mind staying on? Was that Sylvia? We're staying on. The second group, that's the one where the French national anthem was being sung, if you could hear it.
Well, then it would be train to win, maybe.
Okay. And then the last group, which is probably the hardest video to look at.
Yeah, it was the hardest video. Competitive for life.
Okay. So the first group was actually my JV basketball team. I had to go back to Nova Scotia for a bit, and I coached JV girls basketball. And you were correct. Those would be trained to compete girls. They weren't on the varsity team. They were junior varsity. Okay. The second group is actually trained to compete. That was the US versus France, and they played in the first U17 World Cup in Toulouse in France. And I think that would have been 2008 or 9. And then the last group was actually trained to compete also. That was the national championship game for the same year held in Toronto. So the reason I put that up there, because most people always think that the LTAD model is a vertical model, but we have to understand there's a horizontal component to it also. So there's a recreational component, and you're right, there's more a fit for life. Okay, so me going out now and just shooting on a hoop in the street, that's recreation. But then there's a competitive. So you can see like up here in this kind of competitive life, like in Canada, there's not a domestic pro leagues. So a lot of people go into what we call like the beer leagues, men's leagues, women's leagues, and they're competitive for life. They still love to play competitive basketball. I would say that my team that I was coaching there, they were more in this competitive for life. They only want to have 3 things a week. So we would have 2 practices and 1 game. They didn't have time because they were all in starting jobs. They had other things they did, but they still liked to play basketball. If you played on the varsity, it was more expected you were going to have like 3 practices, maybe 2 games. A little bit more commitment. Okay. And then there's the elite. And the closer it is to the left side, the more likely it's high performance. The problem we run into Canada is everybody claims they're elite. Everybody claims that they're an elite program. So what the part of my new job with Canada Basketball is trying to help define what it means to be in these 3 streams, this recreational, competitive, and elite at these different stages. I'm hoping there's not any elite learn to trains, an elite fundamentals, but there's people claiming that they are the elites in those areas. And the problem is that youth sport is starting to become a business for a lot of people, and they're making a lot of money off it. And once you get money involved, it becomes a little blurred. So the podium pathway, go back here. This is this small triangle here. And this is where I spent the last 10 years of my life is working in this area. But this is where it's that train to win, learn to win, train to compete. And you're dealing with more people on this pathway to be elite or being into pros or playing on national teams. Our problem was when I first started, it was always this idea of like cooking pierogies. We don't really care what anybody does in the development system. We'll just pick the ones that rise to the top. But what we started to realize that the ones rising to the top really didn't have the qualities or the characteristics that we needed. So we had to go back into the system and help the system develop better players. instead of just whoever shows up. I'll be honest, the US can do this. The US, if you ask what the US development system is, it doesn't really have a system. It just, they have a whole bunch of entities that play basketball, and the best ones rise to the top. But because there's such a big population playing basketball, they can do that. We can't afford to do that. We need to develop our players because we can't afford to take and just get rid of so many of them. So this is our gold medal model, and it has to fit within the ages or the stages of the model. But there's the 4 pillars: the physical, the mental, the social, emotional, and the basketball. And it's very important that we start to work with our athletes and coaches in all these pillars. And we also use this a lot for our talent identification. We're getting ready to select our top players who will come into our U16 national team camp in March. And, a big part of what we're doing is getting our talent ID people. But you can't have talent ID people saying, oh, she's really good. I like her a lot. Well, we need to be a little more detailed. Okay. So like in there, I'll use the example of the social emotional, where it says environment, we need to know what's her support system like. And that's a big part of my current job. Is a lot of times we have players from the smaller provinces or not from the big cities. She may not have a good support system. So we have to try to create something where she can get some physical training, or maybe she doesn't have somebody who can really get in the gym and work with her. Well, maybe going into the school and helping out find a male training partner that she can work with. And we had an example of a young lady from small town Raymond, Alberta, small town. A lot of times what players are doing is leaving small towns and going into big cities, but she wanted to stay at home. So we work with her father and the coaches and built all the pillar things that she needed for her pillar. And she's now a freshman, and she's been freshman of the week, I think, about 4 times at BYU. So she was able to do that, but she needed to get the support system in place for all the pillars instead of just hoping that they're going to develop and then we pick them off the top. The second thing that we do is we build this foundation. So this is helping programs and our age group team. So I'm starting to work with our age group coaches. And basically what I do with them is they have to start to fill out this box. And so the first thing is they need to know what the vision and purpose is of the program. Who are they coaching and why are they here? So this is a big part. And we will say from Canada basketball perspective, here's our vision and purpose. So I would say as a club, I would want my club to have the main purpose and vision. And now the coach has to align that one team to the club. So we have the overall vision, but now the coaches have to align. And this is where that whole idea of alignment comes in. If they're thinking, oh, we're going to play everybody 4 minutes in sub, and we're like, well, we're trying to win a medal, it may not be aligned. So we have to come to agreement on these things. We also build on like the culture, what's it going to look like, sound like, and feel like in our environment, what are important, our concepts, our leadership. One of our big goals is developing leaders, and how are we going to develop these young women as leaders. And then the big one for me is the learning environment. And this is where we want to make sure are the things we're doing in practice transfer and get retained. And I think it's important that we get more advanced in this. And I jokingly use the example of I have a cell phone. It's a new Apple 16. I could still go and use the old rotary dial phone. Some of us may not know what that is, or a touch tone phone, and it would still communicate. But the technology is nowhere near. It doesn't do the same things. It's not as advanced. It's not as slick. It's not as well researched. But I claim that we have a lot of coaches are still using rotary dial technology in their coaching. Like we know how people learn now. We know how things get transferred and retained, yet we still want to do a whole lot of 5-on-0s, right? Because that's the way I was coached. That's the way John Wooden coached that way. Bobby Knight coached that way. Well, the technology's changed, and we have to embrace the change. So I'm constantly trying to help our coaches improve their learning environment so there's greater transfer and retention. And then in the process component is I spend a lot of time with the planning. So they've got to plan out their training camps. What's a daily day going to look like? What's the off-court sessions we're going to do, right? And then the application is the daily practice plans, how they run. We debrief them. What are they tracking and monitoring under analysis? What are they tracking and monitoring? And then the debrief process. So they have to have all those things in place. And then the pressure components is, like performing in the storm. What are they going to have for being able to perform in the crucial moments? So we build out the plans for all this, and then I work on what I call coach IPPs, individual performance plan for all our coaches, and what is it they need to grow in? Because we ask that of the players, we also ask it of the coaches. So that's just a little more at the high performance level, but a lot of this started from the work we did with long-term athlete development, and then it's just as we get into the Own the Podium is our national government body that really works on the Olympics. It forced us into doing more detail in these areas. So just to summarize, so in the personal factors, we want to develop physical literacy. We want to make sure there's quality, recognize that people develop at different ages, recognize that people are predisposed to certain things. Like if I'm tall, I'm probably more predisposed to basketball than wrestling. It takes time, and it's for life. Now, this picture I put in because this woman right here in the middle, that's Joyce Slip. She was our captain of our 1976 Olympic team. The first year women's basketball was in Montreal. Right here, this is Aaliyah Edwards, WNBA player. So we have here, she played on our silver medal team. Silas right there beside her, who's on our current Olympic team. So this was quite a menagerie of players that are involved in our program. Okay, so and there's the young lady that was in Raymond right there. Okay, so it's involved a lot of players, and I would say that again, if we had taken this picture 10 years before this, we've never had this type of talent or players, and it was a lot of work to get to this level where we were able to have these players. And this was at the WNBA game, that exhibition game that was played in Toronto. It was over 23,000 people at the gym, and I think Canada's going to get their own WNBA team next year, and I think a lot of it is because of the passion that people have shown for women's basketball in Canada. Okay, from the organizational level, you have to be constantly updating it, and that's where Canada Basketball wants me to go back in this because it's kind of stagnated, especially over COVID, and there's no one really taking charge and leading it. It needs to be fully embedded in the whole organization. The awareness around first involvement and how people find out about your programs, having different activities and different pathways. Be careful of specialization too early. That's it leads to burnout when you over specialize. That's an issue we have right now in Canada and North America, is because people are making money off youth, and people are also free education and getting your NCAA scholarship. It's a real tough one we're trying to work on. And then competition, how much appropriate competition, and then the transition. And this picture, I put it in here because this was at an NCAA conference. And what I liked about it was this was delivered by the NCAA, and it was the actual truth about what you needed to do to become an NCAA athlete. The problem with a lot of the NCAA stuff now is it's being delivered by assistant coaches or handlers who have biases as to why they want you there. And it's hard for athletes and parents to find out the truth, right? So we have to do a lot of work, especially with the new transfer portals and NIL. It has totally shook up the whole NCAA basketball pathway. And there's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of false information, and there's a lot of parents and players getting burned by it. So that's one of the first things I have to be working on is, again, constantly updating. And then the system, we have to make sure there's collaboration, it's aligned and safe. There's diversification. Excellence, again, takes time, continuously improve, and evidence-based. this was the two teams from Ontario that won the national championship last year. And of the 24 players in the picture, 20 of them were involved in our junior academy. Okay, so that's alignment, and that's why that's so special, because they were aligning on all the four pillars of the game. And the junior academy has been a huge impact. We're slowly starting to see players into our system. This year's U16 team will be the first national team where it's really their coming of age. But even last year, we had 5 underagers play on our U6, U17 team that won silver at the Worlds, and we had one actually play with the U18 team. So it's really helped because they're getting proper programming. So I'm going to stop my share just in a second, but I think Chris, we still want to do this where we go into a breakout room. We just want you maybe to share with someone else, but what did you like? And then maybe what you see is the biggest challenge or question that you have. And then what's one thing maybe you could do to start with LTAD?
So here I will step in, and Mike, unfortunately, due to technical difficulty, breakout room will be won't be able to do that, to organize it, unfortunately. But we can still open up those questions to discussion. I think it's still those are great questions that I would still love to have all the coaches who are online discuss those. Maybe let's start with the first question, and anybody feel free to step in and maybe share your opinion on that. Maybe write in the group chat what that first question was again, that everybody has as a reminder.
The other way, we could type some answers in the chat too, if they want to just type in the chat.
Exactly.
So to get it started.
I would really love to have this next part, and I think Mike as well. We talked about this workshop that we want to try to make it towards the end interactive, to get your opinions and things like this. So please either type in the chat or feel free to step on us and say something, unmute yourselves. And the first question again was, what did you like about the model? I think I know when I saw the pre-surveys, a lot of people have heard of the LTAD concept already. So hopefully through this workshop or this presentation, you found some new information or you learned a lot of new stuff. Let's see, Lawrence has his hand raised. Lawrence, feel free to.
Sure. Thank you, and good evening. I like the model very much. I've heard from it in my athletics coach part before a couple of years ago. I think it's very good because it gives a nice structure in developing players in general, in starting really from a young age, but also keeps in mind that even grown-up people can play on different levels and but still can have some parts of development. I think one of the biggest issues or problems with a model like this is always getting the commitment of the coaches, of the organizations, of like everybody and everything you need for it, because you always get answers like, yeah, but we always did it like this, or in the past it also worked in a different way. And so it is a lot of work to convince the organizations and the people you need. You need to implement such a model.
Yeah, I'll just build on that. Thank you. One of my first challenges was working with, say, 12-year-olds, was trying to get more participation, because a lot of 12-year-old basketball was very much school-based. So could have, let's say, an elementary school of 300 kids, but only 12 girls and 12 boys got to play basketball. So we tried to change the definition of a team. so that you may have 60 kids at your school and I have 50 at my school. We could still be a basketball team. And what we would do is we'd go to your gym and we'd play 3-on-3. And I knew who my better players were. You knew who your better players. They would play at this basket, and then we could go around to the smallest and weakest players play at this basket. But everybody got a chance to play. But we weren't cutting, all these kids and turn them off basketball. It was just by changing the definition of a team and making it more appropriate for that stage. And you're right, the hardest part was getting coaches and parents, because parents wanted their son, especially their sons, on a team. Well, we had to convince them that this was a team. We just changing the definition.
Anybody else? Anything you liked about the model, challenge with the model? One way you could start aligning using the principles of LTAD. Feel free. So, so for me, what I like about the model, like Lauren said, it gives structure. It's a guide. It kind of gives you, and what I see is really important with the model. It shows that there should be a place in basketball for everybody who wants to play and participate. I think that's really the most important part about the model in general. And I think what we can use in Austria as well. You have a participation part, you have a recreational aspect, you have a competitive aspect, and you have your elite aspect. And we want to open up opportunities for every person to play, no matter how old or how young they are, and no matter what their goals in basketball are. I think this is what this model really shows well. And it can be a great guideline and a reminder in that aspect. Mike, could you maybe talk about or expand on the age stage appropriate training?
Yeah, the trickiest part of the model is, as I said, it says it's developmentally based, but yet most children are based in school based on age. And your cutoff dates for ages can be very tricky. So if you have a January 1st cutoff date, your late developers are the December-born athletes or the December-born children. So it can be very tricky that you'll pick all the kids born in January, February, March on your teams because they're all the yellow bananas instead of the green bananas. So it's very important that you find ways to encourage those athletes. There's been some crazy ideas that you have. Like I was trying to get at our national championships that it wasn't age-based, it was stage. So in other words, if you were still in school, you could go in our train to compete level of competing. But then there was always that thing, yeah, but this kid's failed a grade. They're doing it on purpose to stay in school so they can win another championship. And it just, people get concerned when there's a national title on the line and somebody's not eligible. But what we've actually done, though, is the smaller provinces, like the Northwest Territories, Yukon, and Nunavut, can actually have up to 3 overage athletes compete in the national championships. Prince Edward Island is another small province. It can have 1, and Newfoundland can have 1 overage athlete. And it's made a huge difference for them to have a much more competitive team. Okay. So it's really important but also recognizing what the competition should look like at each age. We promote 3-on-3 basketball up to about 9. And then from say 9 to 12, it's 3-on-3 to 4-on-4. And then at the end of the year, you get to play a little 5-on-5. Like you're progressing. And then it's, when you get into basket height and ball size, also that becomes important as to, and we've experimented with no zone rules and pressure rules and all those sorts of things. But as we've grown, we've gotten better through training the coaches was better than putting in rules because there was always people playing on the edges of the rules. So it was much better to be much more deliberate in our coach education as a way to solve this and making them understand who you're coaching and why we play the game this way. But there's always a few coaches who will come in and you got to go and talk to them and work with them on that's not appropriate. You're making the goalie lie down by doing that at that age.
Okay. I know when we had talked earlier in our earlier meetings, I had asked you a question about, and I think a lot of coaches have this issue, how do you set up a training when in your team you have varying developmental ages in your team, the range, and it's always hard to organize a great training that is appropriate for all the players in your practice. What would some tips or suggestions how maybe coaches could do that?
This is where, like a typical club coach have to understand constraints. Like there's three things you can constrain. You can constrain the environment. So, I can lower the baskets, raise the baskets, right? Ball size, ball weight, right? I can constrain the people or I can constrain the task. So let's talk about constraining the people. Let's say I'm working with I'm going to use U13s. I have my junior academy this weekend. It's U13s. I've got one girl who's 6'6" at 13 years old. She's an amazing young lady. But she's been in her regular program, they always make her play in the post. We're trying to work on her more as a global player. So when we play with her, I'm going to constrain her. You're not allowed to play in the post this weekend. Okay, that's taken her away from her strength, but it's forcing her, but it's what she wants to do because we had a chance to talk with her parents and this is our development plan. So it's forcing her out of her comfort zone in a safe environment because we're not playing for games to win, but it's allowing her to work on the constraints that she needs for her development. Now, there might be a guard that I'm saying, I want you working on this is going to be the area you need to work on. You're only allowed to initiate on the left-hand side of the floor today. You have to, if you initiate on the right, it's a violation. So we constrain her because we're working on her weakness. Say we're working on at a player's one-on-one, we may guide or script the defense. So we may say, defense, we're scripting you. When you're guarding, you only are going to be in what we call pressure, but you're no shocking the ball, no poking at the ball to steal it. You're just going to play mirror the ball. And then another one, we say, you're always going to work on forcing left, or you're going to we can constrain things to help meet the need or the load that child needs. Mm-hmm. And then the same thing with the task, like a big one we have to constrain all the time is spacing. So we say one can't guard two. So we put in simple no dribble handoffs when we're first teaching because they all want to run dribble weave all the time. But it's not really dribble weave. It's just run behind the ball because I know I'll get the ball back. So again, we constrain until they start to understand how to play in proper spacing. Then we may start to give them, okay, you can draw. This is the difference between a dribble handoff and this is between just running behind the ball. So it's about understanding what it is you're trying to constrain to meet the needs of that individual or the team. I think that's the important thing in coaching now. Instead of, I got this great drill off YouTube, I'm going to do this ball handling drill. It's a great drill. No, who are you coaching? Why are they there? And what is it that they need to do? What is the concept that we need to work on? And it usually starts with our principles of play.
Okay, perfect. Any questions, from anybody? Anything? I think we have a great opportunity. Like I said, we have Mike here. Lawrence again. Perfect. Feel free, Lawrence.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, so now this is more or less officially the end, right? Of this workshop.
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
I'd say where the presentation is more or less done.
Okay.
I would say, yeah.
Then I have two questions, or like one question and one thought. First of all, Mike, I am working on a youth concept regarding implementing sports psychology in a youth program. I saw you have a good part of mental stuff in the concept
Yes.
already. Is there more available in general, like maybe even direct practical advice, or is it just in a conceptual
Well,
thing?
it's in our coaching education, our national coaching certification program. At each stage, so learn to train, train to train, train to compete, there's a mental performance component. My problem is I can't just directly share those whole documents because it's part of the national program.
Okay.
But I think if you might look online, but basically in our gold medal model, we have the three C's, and I love this. I think it's very simple for coaches and players. The first C is connections. So we work a lot with players on connections, and we talk about what are the different ways you can connect. So with young players, it's simple as meet and greet, right? And your hellos and your goodbyes. So when you come into the gym, go and connect with everybody, right? And then what's the different way? Oh, you can high five, you can connect with your eyes, you can connect by signaling, you can connect with your voice. And then we talk about a leadership voice, right? And so it's a great way. And then that one all leads into communication skills, how to talk, how to communicate, how to listen, right? The second C is consciousness. And this is where it's all about focus, putting your attention on the right thing at the right time. So now and I'm big on vision, and I call it PVAD. Your positioning improves your vision, which improves your ability to anticipate your decision. So helping players know what the cues are they should be looking for. I think we assume that they know, but we spend a lot of time. Then we do a lot of things on mindfulness, right? Helping them learn how to breathe properly, how to recenter, very important. We do a lot at some stuff. We'll introduce some visualization in there, right? Helping them to visualize what you want to concentrate on. Okay. And then we work on distraction plans. Okay. When you lose it. So I always say you have to learn to get it first. So you have to get your concentration. Then you got to try to keep it. And if you lose it, you got to get it back. But I say the same thing with the basketball. First thing you got to do is get the ball. Then you got to try to keep the ball. Then you got to get it back. Or if it's your energy, you got to get it, keep it, get it back. So we try to put it into simple things like that. And then the last C is the composure. And the composure is really simple. In the storm of the game, when it's the most frustrating, most pressure's on you, can you stay connected to your team and your coaches? And can you keep your concentration on the right thing at the right time and not get distracted? Now you're composed. So it sounds simple, but it really, really helps the athletes, and it gives our coaches a simple way to kind of always apply it on the court and not in some off-court session. Okay.
Awesome.
And then we do a lot of debriefing at the end of practice or in practice sometimes, and we always prompt them to. I use the term ice. We do ice checks. So we always will stop and ask the players, how's our intensity? How's our concentration? And how's our energy? And they know if you explain it to them, they know how to do it. And that's a great way to get young athletes to start to focus on other things besides the basketball.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. And my thought, I don't want to make it too long here from my part, because we were discussing the part of different development levels. In Austria, we often have discussions with a so-called non-competitive rule, where, for example, in an under 14 team, you can have, I think, up to 3 under 16 players. The reason behind it is more that some teams do not have enough players or think they are too weak. I think after this presentation or this workshop today, we should not like throw away this rule, but rethink it so that we do not use it to make to like save teams in general, but to rethink it in a way that we can have developmental justice between the teams and between the different age groups. That's just my thought without any discussion. I want to start with other clubs or whatsoever, but
Well,
yeah.
I'll build on this. Our national championships always used to be, I would call them almost a disaster, because you got to recognize, like, you have Ontario, Quebec, huge populations, and you have Prince Edward Island, the territory is very small. And we used to have just put the teams into 2 pools, play round robins. And we had our national championships, Canada Games, and our national broadcasters wanted to put Prince Edward Island was playing PEI, and the CBC thought this would be the great game to have on live TV as the main event. And I said to them, do not put that game on TV. It is going to be an embarrassment. Oh no, it's the host team versus, this will really sell. I go, it is going to be a disaster. It ended up something like 120-10. And I've been pushing all along that we can't play national championships based on regional representation. Right? So what we were able to do is we still wanted every province and territory to feel the benefits of a national championship. So now we have a power pool, and it is usually Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and then it varies between Quebec one time, or sorry, Alberta. It might be BC one year, Nova Scotia, but teams can get into the power pool based on your last year. But those teams play a round robin within themselves, and then the smaller provinces, weaker provinces, they play a separate tournament. And then there's a crossover, so everybody can still win. But you're not getting Ontario play Northwest Territories, Quebec. They're not playing those teams anymore. And it's such a difference. And you get good games all along in that power pool. So now they're coming, because it used to be on Ontario would go, and then they get maybe one good game the whole tournament. Now they get 4 or 5 really quality games, and there's only one blowout in the crossover. So that's where we had to look at different ways for competitions. Always just saying, no, bring all the teams in, play a tournament, and they'll have the champion. They're done. No, what was age stage appropriate?
Perfect. So I think we got a question out from Gamunden here. Got to unmute yourself, Dana.
Okay. Hey, Chris. Hey, Coach.
Hi.
Mike, I've heard you speak on many different occasions and always enjoy it. Thank you for your time. I think the model is really good because kids today learn differently than they did 10 years ago. And it gives young coaches, especially, a structure to be able to find that balance and develop that connection with their teams. I have a question for you. How many months is the season in Canada? Is this a year-round thing? How does the academy work?
That's the issue right now. Is there, if you're once you enter into, I'm going to say the elite pyramid, like that elite side, it's getting too long. It used to be August was completely off, but the top female player, I'll use the female, and it's the same with the males. They're now playing in prep schools that go from September to February. Then they would jump right into their AAU exposure teams. That goes, like, there's a window in April, then there's a window in July. We would pick up the players for our national teams. We usually run a training camp in March, And then like all June will be our U16 team and go to a FIBA Americas, summers in South America usually. And then our U19 team will pick up at the middle of June, and they basically go to the end of July for the World Cup, and the World Cup's, I think, in the Czech Republic this year. So there's not a lot of downtime. It used to be schools, they would start, say, October and go to March. But then a lot of them, they now play more club, and the clubs kind of go from, I would say, September, they'll pick their teams, not play a lot, and then they go right through to end of April. So it's not good, and we're trying to work on it. And again, there's too much specialization, and it's all being driven by exposure to NCAA. And that's my big job is that's the main reason with the junior academy, because we're educating parents that they don't have to go to all these exposure tournaments in the States. It's okay to stay at home and say no instead of jumping in a car and drive to Ohio. So it's a lot of work, but that's why it's always changing. You always have to be working on your model.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
And I want to jump in from our side, or at least from Basketball Austria side, for everybody. We are also in the process of trying to create our Basketball Austria, let's say, version of LTAD. Hopefully we'll get a base somewhere by the end of the season out, because I think it's also important, like we've said here, it gives a kind of a structure and a guideline for clubs, for coaches. So that's something we're working on. So we're hoping to get that done by the end of the season. Obviously, like Mike said, it's going to be something that's constantly evolving, and we want it to evolve. But I think it's an important step to kind of help everybody get an idea of, hey, where we think also basketball should go in Austria. I would just ask Mike then one question with the competition thing. I think you're talking there in Canada, it's almost year round. I think the club system in Austria, and I think in a lot of European countries, the majority is almost 9 to 10 months, from, I would say, under 10 all the way up to, let's say, elite anyways. What would be your suggestion and competition model for this? I mean, we go from September, from the time school starts in September, something starting in August with practices, all the way until, end of May into June with competitions usually. And that's not even including national team activities for players in the summer.
Well, what we did was created the highest prep school. We aligned with Ontario, Basketball Ontario, and we put in, one of the main things we did was we tried to periodize it better for them. We helped them with periodization. They used to play these tournaments on weekends where you would play one game Friday night, 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday. So we've got it back to more a league where they play 1 game a week. The one that's the tricky one is the trips to the States. Like the actual OSBA itself is awesome because it's 1 game a week. They have development, they have rest, but the coaches keep jumping, taking them down. What we're working on there is educating parents on how many trips you need to go for exposure, and trying to get these clubs also to be a little more transparent on costs, because a lot of times the problem was it wasn't included, but all of a sudden, oh, we're going to go to Ohio. Oh yeah, you have to pay for hotels and meals and transportation this weekend. And it's like, well, we didn't even know about this, but the parents are afraid to say no. So we're trying to build in transparency that you have to reduce, let people know your schedules right away. I'll be honest, with the OSBA too, their U19 national team coaches the best team in the league, and our U17 coaches the second best team in the league. And it's important to get role models. Everybody wants to win, but if the people that are winning in the top league are also modeling what you want modeled, it goes a long way to helping your cause. If the people that are winning in the league are cheating and doing all the wrong things, I don't care what you do, So you have to build relationships, and that's a big part of my job. Is I'm in the gyms all the time talking. You can't just send out a document and everybody's going to, oh, this makes sense. You have to get out in the gyms with the people and see what their problems are and how can I help. And when you build those good aligned relationships, it works. Because then you can, but you're not just changing people's opinions with stats and a fancy book or a website. You need to be in the gym with them. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've done for 20 years is get out into the gyms with people and see their problems and, hey, can we try this? And when you first started, all I had to do was get one little community to pilot it. So now when I go into the meeting and there's always that person, this will never work. We've always done it this way. You can say, well, here's a group in Regina that's similar to yours, and this is what they've done, and they've doubled their number of registrations.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's a key is getting role models, pilot things, get people, their first joiners who really start to say yes. They'll sell it better than stats.
Perfect. So along that lines, maybe the most important question, what can clubs do to start aligning the first steps they could do to implement their own LTAD model without having a national model necessarily to fall back on? But there's obviously some things clubs could potentially do to start aligning with the principles of LTAD. What would be some of your suggestions for the clubs?
I think that always it's self-awareness for change. I think the first thing you do is do an inventory and really look at what ages are we working with? What's the alignment between those stages? Like we used to have national teams, and one coach would speak one language, and another coach would speak another. One was doing Princeton offense, one was doing flex offense, and it was not athlete centered. An athlete going through our program had no idea. Now it's my job is to make sure everything aligns. So it's easy for athletes and easy for coaches to go through the system. So looking at your system and say, well, what are we doing at each stage? What are we doing on the physical at each stage? What are we doing on the mental at each stage? What are we doing? And there should be a progressive approach. And then once you see where where's your roadblocks? What are we doing for retention? What are we doing for bringing in new people? Right? Just starting to do an inventory. And that's what I did with the clubs here was getting them to do some inventory. And a lot of them didn't want to do it because they did not want the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would go in and do it with them. And that's what I did with all the provinces. I went into each province and sat down with them in their office and said, what are you doing at Learn to Train? What are you doing at Train to Train? What are you doing at Train to Compete? What are you doing? Like, just go through a list of things. And then it was easy to start to say, okay, this is what's here. What are we going to do about it? Is this an issue? Or are you happy with it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a club-wide review of where you are at the moment is probably the first step.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's your purpose and your vision. Like, what's your like? I don't like going into an organization and I see a purpose and a vision on a wall, and then I go in the gym and I'm like, that doesn't align. You're saying all this stuff, and it's like that's not happening. So, what does it look like, sound like, and feel like? It should clearly say what your purpose and vision is, and then we should see that actually happening. We should feel that when we walk in the gym. Yeah, we're about whatever it is.
Okay. Good. Are there any more questions before we let Mike go?
Next.
But feel free, as I said. Then, I mean, if there's no more questions, first, Mike, thank you very much for taking the time today to share with us. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate it for the help. I mean, we don't often get a chance to talk with coaches who are so well regarded as you. So thank you very much for the time.
Chris, if there's a second, all my issues, questions we can find and always share. I always my philosophy is steal from the best and share with the rest. I've stolen more goods from some of the best. I try to simplify it down so I can share that with them. Because that's how we get better.
Well, we appreciate it. We'll see how it goes. I would love to try to offer workshops like this more often with clubs and coaches. I think in Austria, I think it's great. So we'll definitely try to take that up. Then to everybody else, thank you very much for attending. I hope you were able to get some new insights, learn something, maybe some new ideas for yourself, for your clubs. Thank you for filling out I ask you again, please fill out the pulse survey form. I put the link in the chat. I will also email it to everybody. So thank you to do that. The next workshop, Mike talked about constraints in the presentation a little bit. The next workshop will be in February, exactly on this topic, constraints-led approach coaching with Felix Engel. I think the date, everybody has the date. So as that gets closer, we'll send out some more information on that, but that'll be the next topic, which I think fits really well into this whole LTAD model of coaching. The LTAD is kind of the framework, and the CLA is kind of the methodology of coaching in the court on the gym. So that's the next step for us in the workshop situation. Again, Mike, thank you very much, and everybody else, thank you for your time. And yeah, I look forward to seeing all of you soon in a gym somewhere. And if you have any questions, please feel free to write me an email or write me a message, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Good. Thank you very much, everybody.